I'm not going to keep this one all that long, but I do want to talk about it. I've been following the events going back to the States. I'm sorry, I'm a little stopped up. But I've been following the events taking place in the States. And I got to be honest, I am somewhat dismayed at what is taking place. There are plenty of things that cause me concern under normal circumstances, but those things I get accustomed to and I live with, and you go on. Such is being a human being. Such is living into a society where there's all sorts of flaws and everything else. But what's taking place with the standpoint of the shutdown, there's something that's going on that's being slipped under the radar that you need to be aware of, because it is going to directly affect your First Amendment speech. I had a conversation with a British chap, I'm going to use the term chap, yesterday at a little coffee shop here in Potsdam. I was shocked to see the British flag, and I was wondering what it was, and it was a cafe, and it was a British guy who owned it. He's been here for, I think, 19 years or something, or 10 years. He's married. His wife was German, and he stayed. We talked about all sorts of things, but one of the things we ended up on also was the Second Amendment. And he says, I am amazed that what you guys are allowed to do with guns. He says, I have family that live in America, and I would call them and be horrified by some of the conversations that we have. He says his family in Mississippi. I said, yes, it's a bizarre thing. I said, they would claim that it is their Second Amendment right to hold those guns. Now, in saying that it's a Second Amendment right to hold those guns, it is also my First Amendment right to criticize the fact that they're holding those guns. And not just that, it's the First Amendment right for pretty much everybody in the country to speak their piece. People say what they need to say, be or for, against the things that they need to be for, against, and made their voices known. Fair enough. You grow up in that society, you get used to that particular society being that way. It's chaotic, but it is what it is. There's a bill that is going through Congress right now at the behest of the Israeli government and minions who are supporting the Israeli government to criminalize your First Amendment right for free speech. Democrats and Republicans trying to slide this through under threat of a government shutdown. You thought Theresa May's Mad Max Brexit was bad. This is criminalizing free speech. Now, I keep being told that a rich person's money is the same thing as somebody's ability to speak, particularly in a political space. But in this case, they're actually going after the ability for people to speak and choose what they want to support or not support, almost in this kind of thought police manifest. In 26 states right now, it is illegal for boycott, divestment, sanctions. In fact, let's read it through Haaretz. And the reason why this is on display is because of this woman. And let's just show the clip.
I'm a speech science pathologist. I have been contracting with Pflugerville Independent School District for about 9 years now. What was unique about my position was that I spoke Arabic, so we were able to correctly evaluate kids who came in with Arabic as a language. I love my job a lot. I've always wanted to be in a job that was in the service field, because I know I'm making a difference. This year, I got a new contract with new compliances, and I came across one that shocked me.
I'll put the video at the bottom, but right here. In 2017, Texas passed a law that bans state agencies from working with contractors that boycott Israel. Meaning, if she decides that she doesn't want to buy a product or engage in some kind of commerce with Israel because they are stealing land and occupying brutally somebody else's country, then she can't have her job. They fired her for this. She's taking them to court. Pflugerville, I love that name. She's taking them to court over this. But they fired her because she wouldn't sign that pledge of not boycotting Israel. The wild part about this, she's not even an activist. The one asks, You know, she's like, look, I'm not an activist, but yeah, I try to avoid products from Israel because, you know, they're brutally repressing another country. Take a look at this. I've shown this image before. This is what Palestine was in 46, 47, up to 67 to 2012. This is where they are now. And Israel continues to take this land, going so far as to call themselves a Jewish state. Utterly and entirely racist on its face. It's, you know, think of America saying we're a white country and enshrining that into law. How would people take that? They would take that as an overtly racist sentiment. Well, same thing, especially since you have other people who live in that country. Not to mention live in that country. It was their country. It was their country. A brutal repression. There's only one way. That's not fully true, but it's hard to see how this ends. At the end of the day, Israel continues to take more land. The Palestinians continue to lose more land because this is a zero-sum game in this. The more they take, the more the other side loses. Palestinians push back, whether through valid or non-valid means. But, you know, I would think no different than French citizens pushing back against the Germans as they were occupying their territory. Push back against this because, after all, they're taking their land. Up to this point, there's been a 1 or 2 state solution. Well, does it look like you can have a 2-state solution under this model? And if more and more land keeps getting appropriated, or let's use a better term, stolen, then what do? Israel is terrorizing the citizens of this particular fledgling, dwindling living space of land, call it a ghetto. Terrorizing them. How does this end? Does this honestly look like there could be a 2-state solution in this situation? And you have a secondary concern of not accepting a 1-state solution. Meaning, completely saying we don't want them to have the same rights as we do. We don't want it to be one man, one vote. That's off the table because that's no longer Israel, in which case you're trying to destroy Israel if you go with a 1-state solution. That is a no-win situation. So, what do you do about that? What has sprung up was a BDS movement, what it is, a BDS movement, boycott, divest, sanction, essentially putting pressure on Israel through the economic space. It's kind of like the was applied to South Africa in an apartheid state. The United States right now, and I just go to Haaretz. Haaretz is a Israeli magazine, but or let's say a newspaper in Israel, but sometimes the stories are pretty good. Anti-BDS legislation coming under heat, yes. 27 states, I just want to make sure I'm accurate, 26. Anti-BDS laws have been passed in 26 United States according to the Forward newspaper, and generally seek to bar governments from doing business with companies that boycott Israel. Now, it goes beyond that, though. Right now, there is, oh, you guys didn't see that, but I've read it. Right now, there is a threat of a government shutdown. Donald Trump wants his wall. The Democrats saying we're not going to give you the votes for that wall. And I generally agree. That wall is a stupid idea. Fact of the matter is the Republican Party has the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, and the presidency at this very moment. They're going to lose the House. It is your responsibility to pass that legislation, whatever that legislation is, to keep the government up and running. And if you can't keep the government up and running, it is your fault. House, Senate, Supreme Court, presidency. You have all branches. You have all branches of government. It is your responsibility, Mr. Trump, to keep the government open at this point. And if you can't do that, there's a certain degree of incompetence on your side for not being able to do it. Democrats and Republicans, however, have been up to no good. They've tried to slip through a provision to criminalize free speech of Israel through the boycott, divestment, sanction. Meaning they're putting through an amendment into this bill that they're trying to work through that will criminalize businesses if those businesses articulate their free speech right of not associating themselves with a racist apartheid regime that is Israel. Take a look at this. There has been a backlash as they call it, in the media and so forth. And you can imagine why. This is a direct assault on free speech. That teacher is suing Pflugerville schools in this legislation. So is the Anti-Defamation League. I like what the New York Times said about this. And just to make the point, Israeli anti-boycott act sponsored by Democratic Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland and Ohio Republican Senator Rob Portman. The bill would impose criminal and civil penalties on American firms that participate in boycott in support of Palestinian rights. That's amazing. That's amazing. We keep being told that money equals speech. But in this particular case, a business that's owned by a particular individual, if that particular individual decides that he wants to do A as opposed to B, because A is not brutally repressing another country and another population, then he could be under civil and criminal penalties by the United States government. Who are you representing? Who are you representing? If you're representing us, then you wouldn't be trying to criminalize free speech. This is an amazing piece of legislation. Who are you representing? Whether you're a Trump supporter, whether you're not, who are you representing? Do you want your elected leaders going after speech in this way? This is a peaceful protest. And it's a peaceful protest that makes the decision that it wants to do A versus B because A, again, is repressing another country. Whether you are for or against Palestinian rights is kind of besides the point. What precedent does this set? What precedent does this set? You sound like a commie. Maybe we need to get rid of your job. Hey, you sound like a Republican. You sound like a capitalist. You sound like a whatever. Maybe you need to not have a job because of this. This is an amazing piece of legislation. Let's keep going. The sponsor reportedly hoped to tack it on to funding legislation that would head off the shutdown. We need you to put in this anti-American piece of legislation in order to stop the government from being shut down. Our bipartisan legislation is a direct response to a highly selective and discriminatory efforts to isolate Israel, such as those by the United Nations Human Rights Council, Mr. Portman said in a statement quoted by the New York Times. Anti-BDS has been passed in 26 states. I read that part. New York Times, I like what they said. It will be more constructive if the political leaders will focus on the injustice and find viable solutions to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict rather than reinforcing divisions between two parties and promoting legislation that raises free speech concerns. That's an understatement. That's an understatement. The New York Times wrote in a lead editorial on Wednesday. For his part, Washington Post columns, I think I like this one the most. Israel and its friends can win the fight against BDS through persuasion and example. Good luck with that. Where is South Africa? South Africa is no longer an apartheid state. Outlawing dissent would never work. With regard to Texas school teacher therapists, he said, as an American citizen, Baha Amwai possesses a number of ironclad rights, the first of which, according to the Constitution, protects her free speech. Fucking A for that. I'm not going to keep this one long. Who are your elected leaders supporting? Are they representing you, or are they representing the Israeli government? When Hillary Clinton got out there and essentially guaranteed that the United States military would be at the waking call or baking call of the the Israeli military, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? This is worse. This is a direct assault on free speech. Just saying. And they're trying to slide this into the legislation that will keep the government open. Pay attention to what your government is doing. Pay attention to what your government is doing. Do you have links to the amendment? All right, so let me put the articles at the bottom. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I read the amendment. But it's always just a Google search away. Yeah, I put the links to the articles at the bottom, but you'd have to look up the exact amendment. Sets a very dangerous precedent. Yes, it does set a very dangerous precedent. All right, I'm going to end this because I don't want this one to go too long. In 14 minutes, for me, it's not horrible. So, if you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. you can always support through Patreon. This is an amazingly dangerous precedent. I covered the story going back, I think, almost a year ago. And there was such an outcry that, kind of went behind the scenes. And now they're bringing it up again when the government is under threat of being shut down. All of these people who are supporting this bill, I don't give a shit if Satan himself is on the other side of the ledger and needs to lose their jobs. Full stop. Full stop. Just saying. All right. You all have a good one. I'll see you in I have time for a few more. Thanks, so.